It's hard to see some of them go, though, and they're not pets. They're not our animals, but if you like what you do, you can't help but form some sort of connection with them. And I think that's why people come to the zoos and aquariums anyway, is to make a connection with these animals. And so us seeing them 5 or 6 days a week is hard not to, have some sort of connection, some sort of bond with them. But you know that the reason that they're going to some other place is to have that chance to breed, or to have more space, or to have, whatever it is that they need.
Hey there, Podcast Aquanauts. It's your host, Casey here. Based on the listener statistics for this show, I know that many of you streaming the podcast Aquatic are parents. And in a sense, this episode is one that's probably going to resonate pretty strongly with you. Species Survival Plans, or SSPs, are an offshoot program of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the accrediting body for more than 230 zoos and aquariums around the world. Unless you work in a zoo or aquarium, and I know some of you do, but you're the minority, you've probably never heard of an SSP, but they're constantly operating in the background to ensure that the populations of animals in the institutions you visit and support are as healthy as can be. What makes SSPs especially interesting, however, isn't just the tremendously important role they play in maintaining species health and human care, but how the decisions they make impact the devoted caretakers who often form deep-rooted bonds with the animals with which they work. And as any parent knows, sometimes the decisions you have to make in the best interest of your child aren't always easy, even if you know that they're ultimately the right ones. Anyway, we'll get into all of that in the upcoming discussion, which features many of my coworkers who not only work with animals that are managed by an SSP, but also, in some cases, actually manage the SSP itself. It's fascinating stuff, I promise, and I'm anxious for you to learn more. So, let's get to it, shall we? On with the podcast. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. Today, I want to talk about an aspect of working at a zoo or an aquarium that if you don't work at a zoo or aquarium, you may not even have heard of, but which plays a pretty important role in a lot of zoological institutions, and that would be species survival plans. But before we get too much into the topic, let me go ahead and introduce today's experts. And I'll start with a newcomer to the podcast, Lori Beth Lee, I should say. You're assistant curator forest. What exactly does that job entail?
I have certain areas that I am over and care for on a daily basis, including our penguins and our birds and our delta and our owl. But also I help manage scheduling and coverage for anything that is not a fish. So I get to work one-on-one with our staff that work with our lemurs, our otters, our turtles, our plants. So it kind of gives me a variety of experience.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the podcast. I suspect, in fact, I know for a fact that you will be back again pretty soon to talk about an entirely different topic. But we'll get into that when the day comes. Across from you, or next to you, I should say, is Maggie Sipe. Maggie, I cannot remember. Your title is still new enough that I don't have it internalized yet.
I think we debated that last time, but I think it's like senior lead keeper of Ocean Journey Forests.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So something like that. That I feel like sums it up, even if it's not the official title.
Maggie has been on the podcast a couple of times. If you want to check her out on other episodes, you can listen to the episode about why you don't want a lemur as a pet. Maggie cares for our lemurs along with a couple of other people who have, one of whom has been on the podcast, Sam. And you were also on the episode about enrichment, so why that's important.
Yes.
Which, as of the recording of this episode, hasn't actually gone live yet. So look forward to both of those.
Yes.
And then across from you and next to me, Bill Hughes is our herpetology collection coordinator.
Yes, that's correct.
Good. I'm glad you added some. You were just gonna. I thought you were gonna nod at first. I'm like, people can't hear you nod, Bill.
They can if I do it loud enough.
Well, don't. That would involve hitting the mic. So let's not try to do that. Okay. So today's topic, as previously mentioned, is species survival plans. So, who wants to be a brave soul and go ahead and offer up the elevator pitch for what exactly a species survival plan? We'll call it SSPs from now on, just for shorthand, because I don't want to have to say it every time. What is an SSP and what does it do?
Well, I think Bill is the most well-versed in this area.
Bill, you've been voluntold to offer up a description. Okay. So what is an SSP?
I'll take the hit. So Species Survival Plans is a AZA. It's AZA program.
So it's Association of Zoos and Aquariums.
Yes, sorry. They are a program of the AZA, and it's managing species of animals in captivity. And that sounds very vague, but once you delve into it. So these are cooperative managed programs for certain species of animals. It's animals that they want to have in zoos, and so it's to have viable populations of these animals in zoos. The current incarnation has it's changed in recent years, so some stuff that used to be SSPs are no longer SSPs, but some of the taxon advisory groups that are in charge of them still maintain those species as stud books. But the goal is to have demographically viable, genetically viable, healthy populations of animals for the next generation.
Okay, there's some things to unpack there.
Yes.
Oh, Maggie has her finger raised in the air.
The way I always pitch it to my friends when I talk about it is it's this big collection, like all of the zoos in the Association of Zoos and Aquarium Network, the AZA network, work together. So everyone who has radiated tortoises is on a list. So we know all of the radiated tortoises in professional care in North America. And then we know who their sires were, and like who their mothers were, who their fathers were. So what their genetics are, who we can send where to breed with who. So we do that for any managed species survival plan. So it's kind of like a big online dating database.
I like that description.
Yes.
That makes it easy to understand.
Sorry, I have the boring description. Because
I was like, he has the professional description.
Because I've been involved with it so long, and I was thinking today I haven't actually looked in a while for the official definition because it's changed. So
yeah, Maggie, I think did it. I mean,
that's much better than mine.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, they're in charge of, it's like groupthink for the health and well-being of an entire population of animals in human care.
Yeah, and I think my favorite thing about it is when I get to tell people about the SSPs and what they do, people are like, whoa. Like they had no idea it goes that deep. They're just like, oh, you have penguins. How do you even get penguins? And it's like, well, you have to talk to the SSP. You have to like work with all the other institutions that have penguins to get some penguins. And people like just don't think about that or how that functions.
They're like the behind the scenes Illuminati for deciding what happens with species.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Lori Beth, do you have anything to add to the definition? And we'll get into which SSPs the three of you have been involved in the past or currently next. But do you have anything to add to that description?
Yeah, there are, especially with penguins, when I get questions about the SSP, I always like to mention that it keeps our population healthy so that we're not having to go and collect any more eggs from their natural habitat. And, it's different for every species of animal in human care. And there are some that come in from, the wild at some point. But for penguins especially, it's a very important thing because we don't want to disrupt them in their natural environment. And so this is a very important thing to keep track of genetics. We've been doing it for 40 or 50 years now, and we want to keep that population healthy for another 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, on that point is I say you can look at zoos and aquariums as living seed banks. So because we're doing all this work through the SSP and keeping the genetics healthy without having to take specimens from the wild, as Lori Beth mentioned, it keeps a really healthy population in collections. That way, if anything happens, there could be potential that these animals still exist. They will not go extinct necessarily off the planet because they are in professional care.
Yeah, you end up with that situation, that really unfortunate classification of extinct in the wild, but implicit in that, but in human care, they're still around.
Right.
Can any of you think of an example of a species that's extinct in the wild, but is still around because of being in a zoo or an aquarium?
McCord's box turtle. It's a Chinese box turtle. We have some here. I don't think they've officially been declared extinct, but no one has seen one in the wild in over a decade. There's a pretty big population of them in zoos.
Okay. So that's a good example of one of the ways that zoos and aquariums are doing a lot of good for the representation of species that otherwise might just blink out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not extinct in the wild, but to some extent, African penguins are really, really, they're endangered. They're protected. And their population at zoos and aquariums is doing fine, but out in their natural habitat, they're not doing fine.
Yeah. Similar. I mean, it's most species at this point, the way I pointed out to people, so many people tell me like, well, animals should just be in the wild, but the wild is disappearing. And that's just a sad fact. And there are a lot of species going extinct. And if we didn't have them in these situations to teach people about them, no one would probably care. and then they would just be gone. So it is a sad thing that like almost all the animals that most of us take care of are endangered. I mean, lemurs are critically endangered, but the ring-tailed lemurs also thrive in professional care situations. So it is just like, that's why these programs are important.
Yeah, if you're going to have them, you owe it to the species to do your utmost to ensure that the ones that are around are around as long as possible.
Correct.
Let's talk about the involvement that all three of you have had in SSPs, either again in the past or currently. I'll start with you, Lori Beth. Which SSP managed species have you helped to take care of and possibly contribute to the SSP management decisions for the entire species as a whole?
Are both species of penguins that we have here. We have a species of penguin gentoo, and there's a couple like subgroups of them, Ellsworthy and Papua, and we have the Papua gentoo penguins here, and then our macaroni penguins as well. So both of those have been involved with the SSP, and we do also have a stud bookkeeper. So we have someone who keeps, individual records of these birds. They're at various institutions throughout the country. So one person is in charge of keeping tabs on every macaroni penguin hatched, and every 2 to 3 years they'll put out a new stud book and give us information. And what we do with that is we use that when breeding season rolls around, so we can see the genetics of our birds and the diversity all over the country and figure out which birds are good matches to have chicks. We have to be smart when we're managing a population. We can't let every bird have a chick every single year because there has to be a spot for these birds to go. We can't hit our capacity in one breeding season, which is very possible. If everybody had fertile eggs, we would hit our capacity in 1 year, and we'd have to arrange for other places for these birds to go live. So looking at that stud book every few years is really important. It also lets us know if a bird is too closely related to another bird. You definitely don't want to harm the genetics in any way. And also it lets maybe Nipper and Flower, who are a gentoo couple here, they've had multiple chicks, and those chicks now live at other zoos and aquariums. And if they're all having chicks, then maybe that particular genetic line is very well represented right now. So they want us to kind of hold off, maybe discourage that breeding for a couple years and see what happens. And so it allows us to just safely and smartly make sure that these birds stay healthy. It's the same thing you do if you have cats or dogs at home. They can't have puppies and kittens every year. You don't have anywhere for them to go. It's not necessarily the healthiest thing for them mentally or physically. So we're just doing our best to make sure that they stay healthy and safe.
So let's talk just for a second before we move on to Maggie and Bill's SSP involvement and talk about why genetic health matters. So when you're talking about the entire population of a species in human care across all the institutions that exhibit them, why does it matter that you don't have one penguin that's more represented, or one lemur that's more represented than others? What difference would that make in terms of the long-term health and robustness of a population? Yeah,
it could just lead to issues developmentally. It could, we don't always know what it might lead to medically. If certain things are carried on from males to females and they're passing that trait on to all of their individuals, we want to make sure that it stays diverse, that the gene pool stays diverse, and it's not the same two parents that are, having chicks everywhere. We also want to make sure that as these birds age, that they have the opportunity to breed or not breed just based on what they want to do. Breeding season for penguins is a very stressful time, and sometimes it's a stressor that you can't see with the naked eye. Sometimes the birds are mentally just stressed, trying to find a nest, find a partner, and pair up. And as they age, that can be taxing on them. It's also harder for the females as they age to actually produce eggs. So we've got some very old birds in our group, and we've noticed that the eggs that they lay are not the normal size. Sometimes they're not even, the shell's not even hard. And so by being able to manage by switching any egg they have with a false egg, with a dummy egg, they're able to go through breeding season without the added stress of raising the chick as well. And a penguin that is twice as old as what it would naturally live to be might not want the stress of parenting again. We do have a 30-year-old macaroni and a 33-year-old Gentoo, and I can tell you those girls are probably not excited about breeding season coming up and having to raise a chick. So it's a little bit of managing for population's sake, but also for mental health of these guys.
Yeah, so I guess SSPs, even though we've talked about them in the context of decisions at a population level, an SSP can also have an impact on an individual level.
It can, yeah. And it also, with penguins and with other species of animals, you can't make a male and a female be together and breed if they don't want to, obviously, but you can do things to set the stage, I guess. So if genetics are needed to be mixed up, you can move an animal to a different zoo or institution, and you just coordinate with that other zoo, and you can transport animals and put them in the, same spot and give them the opportunity to breed, which will help 20 years down the line for those genetics. Our population is pretty small, so we haven't really had to move any animals out for SSP reasons. But every year when this comes up, we get a survey saying, how many individuals do you have? Are you willing to take more? Can you take more? And are you willing to send them out if you need to? And we have sent birds to other zoos and institutions before, mostly our young ones. But we do send them to other places, and that helps keep those genetics mixed up.
We had a pretty large group of penguins leave the aquarium or moved from the aquarium not too long after I started. It was like 2018?
We've done it twice. I think so. So the first time SeaWorld came here on a big refrigerated truck and took, I believe it was around 8 birds at that point that we had hatched up until that point. And then a few years later, we were very close to our capacity again. So we actually drove them to Memphis on a refrigerated truck and met SeaWorld keepers there, and they flew to California, and within 24 hours, they were at their new home.
Okay, there are some things I want to circle back to, but Maggie, what SSPs are you currently or previously involved in?
So I'm technically involved in all of the SSP planning for all the lemur species that we have. So as Lori Beth mentioned, the Species Survival Plan sends out a survey to every institution that holds that species, and you fill out that survey like, this is how many we have, this is what we where we display them in our institution, and what programs we do with them, how we educate them, or what our intended use is. Is it just off breeding, or are we using them for programs? How many can you hold? If you have offspring, how long can you hold the offspring? It's an intense survey depending on the species. I currently am seated as the vice chair of the red-collared brown SSP, which we got John and Jesse, the red-collared browns, back in late 2019 because they went on exhibit the first time when we shut down for COVID. So we brought them here. Mostly I went to the Prosimian tag, which is Taxon Advisory Group, and kind of asked, what is there a need for within the prosimian world? What do you need housing for? We would like to bring a third species of lemurs to our lemur habitat. And I got approached by a few different species that were well represented within our state. And then I found a herd of red-collared browns and found that there weren't that many institutions they were represented at. So that seemed like a good fit for us. And then, as I think I've spoken about them previously, they're such a different lemur species that I've kind of been enamored with them a little bit ever since. And they're a unique one because it's a very small SSP. And it is kind of on the verge of not being even considered an SSP at this point, because there are only 34 individual animals in U.S. zoos and aquariums. So it's pretty small. We just kind of squeaked through on that minimum requirement there for the lowest ranking SSP.
So with lemurs in particular, we were thinking about things like breeding, and Lori Beth mentioned the stress of breeding season. When you talk about lemurs, and I think we talked about this in the previous episode, and if we didn't, we should have, that lemurs all are or tend toward being matriarchal.
Most lemur species are. Red-collared browns do not. So
Okay.
they are the exception. They are the exception to the rule. Almost every lemur rule there is, red-collared browns break.
Okay. So, but normally you have a female-led society.
Yes, and it's matriarchal. Aunts, moms, grandmas stay in the group. Babies up to 2 years. If they're boys, they're kicked out. 1 to 2 men in the group at a time. Forget the rest, apparently.
So I imagine that given that that's the case, that must play a pretty significant role in SSP decisions when it comes to moving animals between institutions, right? Because I'm assuming that complicates breeding arrangements.
It completely complicates breeding arrangements. A lot of people ask us why we only have male ringtails. That was a huge need for SSP collections. Everyone wants to breed. Everyone wants babies. Babies are a huge draw for the public. They're super cute. They make great social media content. We
would love to have some baby
there's
ringtails,
so
just
many
for
reasons
clarity.
people want babies, but the problem is the birth rate isn't 90% female. You have to have bachelor groups of males, and even in the wild, bachelor groups form for boys who aren't allowed to get in good with the ladies, I guess. So we have one of those bachelor groups, and I adore all of our male ringtails, and it does serve a huge purpose for the SSP, because if they ever asked us to send one of our boys out to try breeding with a female group, we obviously would. But we have a very stable group of ringtail boys all together, and that is very rare that people are willing to hold just males. So we are fulfilling that need for our SSP in that need. And vice versa in our red refs, when we lost Josephine and there was a female readily available because she had had a few litters of offspring and needed to go somewhere else, they paired her with Avior. And if it hadn't been for the SSP in the stud book, we would not have known maybe that they were actually from the same litter. So if we weren't recording that data 15 years ago, we wouldn't have known that they were actually brother and sister. But they actually make great companion animals to then retire. So Lyra's well represented at this point because of Lyra's genetics being well represented, and so are Avior's since they're twins. So it's nice that they can retire and we don't have to think about it anymore. That does mean, again, no babies, but it fulfills a need because these animals could be healthy for up to 30 years and they're only 16 years old. You don't want to just throw them out because they're no longer breeding. They still serve a very important role here, and they're still very important for the SSP. So, there's just so many things that we do and things we have to think about when it comes to this that I think the public doesn't even know go into zookeeping.
The Tennessee Aquariums Podcast Aquatic is made possible by support from the Tennessee Conservationist, the official magazine of Tennessee State Parks. Each issue is filled with fascinating stories about Tennessee's native species, rich history, and unique culture. It's also your guide to exploring state parks and planning your next outdoor adventure. Subscribe today at tnconservationist.org. Another thing that SSPs, I imagine, play a role in, and I'm almost sure this is true because I'm fairly certain this has come up in our conversations as we've documented some animal care stories here at the aquarium, that being part of an SSP also gives you access to a network of professionals and experts to lean on and to bounce ideas off of in situations where you have something happen with an animal where you need some clarity and some guidance on how to proceed forward with animal care issues, right? So do you see SSPs kind of serving a role as a body of institutional experience and knowledge that you can turn to when something happens that you need help with?
Absolutely. Even currently, something I'm doing for the collared SSP is I am editing chapters of our animal care manual. And so SSPs are responsible for putting animal care manuals together. So there are some for many different species. I think there's a penguin species that has an animal care manual, but that is the SSPs put those together. And that is
what are those exactly? Explain
okay, so an animal care manual basically has all the natural history of an animal in one place. What a lot of institutions do, I'm working on the research chapter. So research that is currently happening on lemur species in professional care is a whole chapter. And so it's talking about the benefits of research, what we can gain from researching animals in professional care situations and how we can apply it to wild conservation. And then there's also a training chapter that I'm currently editing as well that talks about different training that's happened and training that's beneficial and like bare minimum training you should be doing with the animals in your care and that kind of thing. But there's also chapters on nutrition and physical health and all those kinds of things. So if you're thinking of getting an animal, that's like the first thing you would look at is if there's an animal care manual.
Bill, let's add you back into the conversation. What SSPs have you been involved in or are you currently involved in?
I'm involved in quite a few, and I'm involved on different levels of this. So ones I'm currently involved in, that's an easier question. I'm the coordinator for spiny turtles for the SSP. I'm also the stud bookkeeper. One of the other staff here, Charlie, is the vice chair, which now means I can give him stuff to do and I can not deal with it. It's lovely. I like this. We didn't used to have vice chairs. It was optional, but now they're saying everyone's got to have a vice chair. So
And that's how I got my position.
I know. It's good stuff.
It's nice that you work at the same institution, though. Much easier to just pass things off.
It is, but it's also good. It's getting more people involved in it, too. What else? Spotted turtle, SSP. I'm the stud bookkeeper and the vice chair. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Coelan box turtles. I'm the vice chair. Radiated tortoise, SSP. I'm the stud bookkeeper.
You also teach the classes on how to teach other people to do the
class
things.
on population management for stud books. So teach people how to do the stud books. And the vice tag chair for turtle tag for the taxon advisory group. So we oversee all of our SSPs.
Wow. Okay. So in the past, which species have you been involved in caring for?
Well, we used to have, before they were reimagined in the past 4 or 5 years, there were a lot of SSPs, and the consensus was that it was not really sustainable. There were nearly 600 SSPs, and
why would it not be sustainable?
For a variety of reasons. The main one was just resources. Like, well, it's a lot of animals to try to manage. The Population Management Center in Lincoln Park is the one that does all the breeding transfer plans, and it's like, well, that's a lot of things to do. I mean, a breeding transfer plan, usually when I have one of those meetings, it's like half a day, but if you've got 600 of those things that you're taking care of and resources, it's in space and stuff, it's like, it was decided to basically get the conservation aspect of the SSPs away. So basically that's the line now. SSPs are not for conservation. They're to maintain viable populations for zoos and aquariums to have.
I'd like to point out it's almost all volunteered effort too.
Yes.
Like every SSP and tag people, like those people are not getting paid on top of their jobs. They're doing their jobs and doing this on top of it. And we're lucky we're at an institution that supports us doing it when we can on the clock as much as possible. But I know a lot of people who are on these committees, on these SSPs, on these tag advisory groups that don't get to do it on the clock and are doing it in their spare time.
And also, like, just seeing, the people that are the coordinators and are having to contact every zoo and individual that has these animals, that's a lot of waiting for people to get back to you. That's a lot of being on the East Coast versus the West Coast and time and calls, and this person hasn't gotten back to me. So it can be challenging, and I've seen it, with what Bill and Maggie have to do, trying to just keep everything organized. So it's not a simple thing.
Which is why it was unsustainable and being streamlined.
Well, the good thing, because you brought this up, and this is fairly new, it's a welcome change. So it's now an AZA standard, and it's not negotiable. If you are a stud bookkeeper, you have to take the class. It's not vacation time. Your institution pays for it. They pay for your travel. You need time to work on your stud book, then you get time, and it's not really a emotional or, good job buddy support now. It's like, it's part of your job, and if there's an issue, then we can take it up with higher authorities at AZA. They're saying you can't do this anymore. Like, you have to support them physically. You have to give them time. You have to give them resources to do this.
So when you were giving the litany of species that you have various associations with, whether that's stud book management or serving as vice chair, that does seem like an awful lot of work. I mean, even just a listing of names, took a long time. So what makes it worth taking on all of those extra responsibilities? Why is it worth adding that amount of stress and work onto your plates that are already pretty full?
So for me, at least, it's really not been that stressful. When I've had to start a stud book from scratch, that's labor intensive. But once it's done and you're just maintaining it, especially now since we use like a web-based database to do this, ZIMS, we get the information. We don't necessarily have to go, hey, tell me about your penguins. If it's a ZIMS institution, it comes to you. You still have to do some communication, but a lot of it's been automated in the sense that, you don't have to go seeking out things. But by teaching the class, it's good for me because it reminds me of stuff I don't use. Like there's some parts of the class I just never used myself, but I've gotten more interested in it. So probably because I started teaching the class, I actually took the old spotted turtle stud book because no one else wanted it. It had been abandoned for a long time, so it was really bad. It had lots of errors, it had lots of bad information. So it was super cool to fix it. And now it's easy. It's like it took time to fix it. But once it's up and running, it kind of coasts on its own with an occasional push. And radiated tortoises was the same way. It had like 1,400 errors. It had a couple of thousand animals that had updated information, but it took less than a year to get it fixed. And once it was fixed, it's like now once in a while, once or twice a month, I'll look at it and go, oh, a new animal's been born, an animal moved, accept it. And it's up to date still.
I mean, as we said, it used to be volunteer work and it used to not be that supported by the institutions for people. So like a lot of people were stepping away from it and a lot of people are tired and burnt out of it. And so I think adding the vice chair position, which is now the position I hold, and I'm happy to step into because like the idea of applying to be just the SSP coordinator without having any like entryway is intimidating. And so adding this vice chair position that they've done for a lot of the SSPs, I think is exciting because it allows me to step in. And now I'm going to be working side by side with Chris, who does does the one that I work on, whereas she was doing it solo for so many years. And so I'm like, she knows everything like the back of her hand at this point. So it's not a ton of like work on the daily, but she has a lot of projects she wants to accomplish that just kind of go by the wayside that now I can step in, learn what she knows, and help her accomplish those things.
So just for clarity, the coordinator then would be the person overseeing everything for the SSP.
In the SSP, and then they report to the tag, which is overseeing all the SSPs.
Okay, so the tag then would be an umbrella term under which lots of SSPs for animals that all belong to a specific taxon.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's lemur tag and turtle tag and penguin tag.
But I'm also the internal representative for the behavioral tag. So there's a training and enrichment tag SON advisory group.
So the tag or a SAG?
Well, SAG, Steering Advisory Committee.
Scientific advisory.
Yeah, whichever one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope everyone.
There's so many things.
I hope everyone listening to this episode is enjoying the bowl of alphabet soup that we're feeding you with all of these acronyms.
I used to work for the military as a defense contractor. And so I thought the acronyms were pretty heavy back then. It never ceased to amaze me. There are acronyms that once you start unpacking them, one of the letters was another acronym. It's like, wow. But my point is that AZA and tags and SSPs and SAGs and all this stuff, it's just, wow, acronyms are more prevalent than I thought they were.
For more background on Bill Hughes and his storied career and his interesting career path to the aquarium, see the episode on why in the world we have so many turtles here at the aquarium. Also, that was about, 9 months ago that you and I were sitting together in a room recording that. Let's talk a little bit about SSPs on we've talked about them from the clinical distance of what they're aiming to achieve. But what I think is interesting about SSPs is the on-the-ground impact it has on animal care specialists or caretakers and the relationship they have with the animals they care for. Because as we've talked about a couple of times in this discussion so far, when an SSP makes a recommendation to move an animal, that implicitly means that one person who has cared for that animal potentially for years is having to basically say goodbye to that animal. The animal is moving to another institution. So I would like to know what impact that has had on the three of you, if that has ever happened to you, or if you know any stories about how other coworkers or people you've worked with at other institutions, how they deal with the ramifications emotionally of an SSP decision that takes an animal from their care and moves it to a different institution.
I mean, it's a part of our job. It has happened to every single one of us. I mean, if you think about what Lori Beth has gone through, they've hatched babies and she's had to send them out. So like, you raise a baby, you send it away. I mean, I've done it at other institutions. A red panda was born at one of my facilities, moved on to another facility and had cubs of her own. You know, it's, you miss them, but also to see them go and do what they're supposed to do and thrive. It's really exciting stuff.
You miss some of them. Some of them you don't miss.
Especially the penguins, because they're biters.
we do. So, you know, one other part of this thing is, you know, when we first got our penguins, we communicated with SeaWorld, because some of those individuals that have been, especially at SeaWorld San Diego, have been there since the 80s. And they were part of the original caretakers for the first penguins brought to the United States. So they know their stuff. They've been doing it for a long time. They wrote the care manual. They know what they're doing. And so we contacted them to get our birds, and they did not send us all of their favorites. They definitely had a short list of troublemakers, and they were like, this is the opportunity for this bird to go.
That is true. If they give you a choice and you're like, oh, you choose. No. They're going to send you the one they don't like. They're going to send you the problem child for sure.
And so sometimes, like when our birds, when we were ready to send them back out, basically we had sent most of the chicks up until that point in the first shipment, because we wanted to send out the younger birds. And the second time around, we were sending chicks, but we were also trying to get our numbers, our male-female numbers, a little closer to even, because during breeding season, there's a lot more aggression when there's not the same number of birds, when they don't have the chance to have everyone pair up. And so we were trying to cut down on aggression, and it got to the point where we needed to send, I think, 2 female macaronis and a male, and we knew the male macaroni. We knew who was going back to sender, and we said, you know, he came here as a very young bird and kind of worked his way up to the toughest macaroni, but he was going back to a colony of 300 birds, and he was going to learn that he couldn't quite have that personality all the time. It's hard to see some of them go, though, and they're not pets. They're not our animals, but if you like what you do, you can't help but form some sort of connection with them. And I think that's why people come to the zoos and aquariums anyway, is to make a connection with these animals. And so us seeing them 5 or 6 days a week is hard not to, you know, have some sort of connection, some sort of bond with them. But you know that the reason that they're going to some other place is to have that chance to breed, or to have more space, or to have, you know, whatever it is that they need. And so in the end, it's good. And it always is fun if we can go to those places in the future and visit and be like, that was our bird.
Which you've done. You've done that,
I
right?
have. Yeah, I've been to San Diego, and I couldn't get up close and personal because when I was there, their birds were nesting. But our first chick, Pepper, who was incorrectly sexed as a female, but was actually a male, he was sitting on his first egg when I went to visit. So it was pretty cool to see. And they take about 6 years to mature for macaroni. So that was a long time coming, and it was pretty special to see, you know, it come full circle. And he found a mate, and he had learned how to build a nest and sit on this egg. And they said he was very, very good at protecting his egg.
Oh, it's like, oh, my baby's grown up.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to push them out of the nest eventually. And I mean, you know, penguins are very notorious for, they don't have family bonds. They don't stick with their family. So
Maggie, as far as I know, we haven't had a lemur that's had to leave our institution to go somewhere else based on an SSP decision.
No,
right?
we have not. So we have, when we opened, we really wanted to fill the needs of the SSP. So we definitely took a lot of the well-represented young boys that nobody else wanted when it came to ringtails. And we did bring a pair of red ruffs that we were hoping would breed. And Josephine just said, no babies for me. And we were like, great. And then, now Avior is with his sister. So no, we haven't had to. We thought we might have to send John out after we lost his mate, Jesse. But luckily they were like, please don't, just hold on to him, and hopefully we'll get someone soon to join him.
Interrupting this episode to bring you a little bit of happy news. As it so happens, this episode was recorded several months ago, and in the time since we had this chat, the SSP for red-collared brown lemurs found a suitable companion for John. Just last week, as I'm recording this, Quintana, a beautiful female red-collared brown from the Dallas Zoo, is now on exhibit at the aquarium, and she and John immediately became nearly inseparable the moment she showed up. Who doesn't love a happy ending like that? Anyway, let's get back to the podcast, shall we?
But no, we've never had to send anyone out of the lemurs, but I have had to do it in many other positions before.
Yeah, so talk about, you came to us from Indianapolis?
I worked at the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo in northern Indiana.
Northern Indiana, okay. Anyway, so what are some animals, what experiences have you had prior to the Tennessee Aquarium that have been SSP related?
I was what is called in some circles a swing or a float, which means I filled in a lot of different roles. So when we had a red panda cub, it was one of the first few. It was the first one while I was there. Her name was Malia. Gorgeous baby, raised perfectly healthy, adorable little, would toddle around and cause mayhem in her own little way. But she now, I think, resides at Potter Park Zoo in Michigan. And so she moved there, has had babies of her own. She's the one that I think, because she was the first red panda born. Red pandas are also, really hard to breed in professional care situations. So that having that success, those keepers did a great job. And I luckily got to help with that and formed a relationship with her. And seeing her leave was really, really sad, but also then getting to go see her at her new facility where she has had babies and done well for herself is also really cool. It's just, there's also just okay, well, this animal's going to move from this section to another section, so it's no longer under your care. Or if I'm if no one on a certain string had been sick in a long time and I didn't have to go help them or cover, or there are animals I wouldn't see very often, but then would get to go take care of just once in a blue moon. So it is just a part of the job, and animals get sick and we lose them. And so honestly, I think best case scenario, if you have to say goodbye to an animal, is it going to another institution to thrive.
I was going to say that is a better outcome if you're going to have to bid an animal farewell than to have it be due to medical complications, right, or old age.
Right, which we've all had as well. We have longer careers. Luckily, some of the animals we work with, like our penguins and lemurs, can live up to 30. A lot of the stuff you live with. I know, I was like, turtles can live a lot longer, some, but...
Bill, let's move on to you, because the turtles obviously can be very long-lived, but you've also some species you haven't mentioned that I think were previously SSP managed and maybe are no longer under an SSP, that we've had a lot of success, or you've had a lot of success in raising in human care, are like the Beale's four-eyed turtle and the four-eyed turtle and the American forest turtle.
Yes. So Beale's, I think, was a stud book. I don't think we ever made it an SSP, and it never really went anywhere as a stud book. It is now a stud book, but because we have all but one or two of those animals here, we have an institutional stud book. So just keeping track of our genetics, because we still have a big population of that species. The four-eyed turtles were an SSP. The minimum requirement for institutions, one of the things to make it an SSP versus being downgraded, whatever that means, to a stud book, was it had to be at least 15 institutions. So the four-eyed turtles were at 7. I didn't think there was any way I could get that to 15 in within the time frame. So that's now a stud book.
And you mean sending some of the ones that we've hatched out to other institutions for them to
trying to get more institutions to have the species.
Why is it a requirement for an SSP to exist that it have a certain number of institutions? Why is it? Isn't the population in human care at one institution still the population in human care?
Well, because the SSPs now are trying to have maintain populations for zoos and aquariums to have. And so part of it was driven by interest. Like the zoos have an interest in this species.
It's
And
also,
so-
if it's at one institution, then that institution can just, why does it need to be a collective if it's all at one spot?
That's a very good point.
And
I feel dumb for bringing that up.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's something you have to think about. I mean, technically ours is at 13 and we're trying to squeak through. That's our goal, is to get to 15. But
Yeah, spiny turtle's at 13 now, but one of them wants to get rid of the animal, so now I'm at 12. And I think when it first
just
went
say
over,
no, you can't do it.
well, so far I managed that because I haven't found anyone to take it. But when they first transitioned, I was at 14, so I was a provisional SSP, which means I'm not necessarily secure, and some stuff needs improving. But yeah, anyway.
Well, and there's another point to be made too. When one animal is only held at one institution, then heaven forbid something happen, that entire population could go. And so we do that even here with our Laurel Dace that we're working with. There's 2 separate populations so that if a new parasite or something shows up, it doesn't affect everybody. And so the benefit of having these animals spread out at other places is to help preserve that population. Should there be a natural disaster, should there be a fire, a flood, or something beyond our control, or a disease that pops up that just, eradicates and attacks one particular species, we have other places that still have this animal, especially if it's a very much endangered animal. So
Sure.
we want to kind of encourage at least having them at 2 or 3 locations. 30 is fantastic,
15 will do.
Yeah, 15's a good goal.
All right.
Yes, it's my goal too. Good
All
luck.
right, so, Bill, but I did want to talk about the fact that because we've had success. So at this point in the conversation, I hope that I found a way to insert a record scratch, because you're actually going to be hearing us from a couple of weeks in the future from the time of when we first started this conversation. I had an SD card that malfunctioned and inconvenienced all 4 of us by forcing us back into this room to continue the discussion that we thought we'd recorded, but apparently had not. So, Bill, I was asking you when we first had this conversation, whether when you had to send an animal, say a Beale's 4-eyed turtle, a 4-eyed turtle, or an American forest turtle, for example, to another institution as part of a move to add to the collection at another zoo or aquarium, whether that actually affected you. So, I mean, I could see it not really affecting you.
It does affect me a little bit. When they first hatched, they're pretty cute. I like having a bunch of little baby turtles around, but the reality is we're going to have more. And if I can send these off, then I have room to have more. So there's a little bit of a tug at the heartstrings when they leave, but someone will emerge to take their place.
Well, and in the case of those 3 species, you, we, I guess, but you more specifically have had success. Like, you are the only one really, propagating all 3 of those species, right?
In zoos in the U.S., yeah.
Yeah. So, does that give you any sense of extra attachment than you would have maybe if it were a species that was represented more broadly?
I guess there is a little bit, but it's hard to quantify. Again, if I get rid of them, I can make more.
That's such a use.
At some point, I'm going to run out of room, so I have to make them go away.
I feel like it's got to be a point of pride when you send them other places and you're
Yes.
like, those are my turtles.
And the other thing is, I like visiting zoos and aquariums. It's a weird hobby, I guess, because I work in this field. It's like you'd think you'd have enough, but I like to go to those places. So,
Well, presumably the people listening to the podcast Aquatic also are fans of zoos and aquariums, and maybe they like to go to zoos and aquariums too.
but I do too, and this gives me new friends to go visit, as well as progeny.
Fair enough.
And remember, like, these animals are going to places that are AZA accredited. We're not sending them to just anybody. We're sending them to reputable places. And so when we actually do get the opportunity to go visit some of these places and we see our animals and we see them thriving under someone else's care, it makes you feel a little bit proud that you had something to do with that. So,
Maggie, have you ever had that opportunity to go see an animal you used to care for?
I know I have. None stick out to me because at a certain point too, like, it is a little like sending a kid off to college, but I'd say it's probably more akin to kicking a baby bird out of a nest because, like, we still have.
Do you have to kick them? That feels a little bit intense.
I'm just, I think we have so many animals in our care that it's like, yeah, I can remember fondly animals I've taken care of in the past, but you have to make room for the new ones who come to you as well. So, and you, as Lori Beth said, you're sending them someplace where hopefully the keepers are just as passionate, care just as much in different ways, and you can learn from them and share information. But yeah, it's a little bit like, okay, on with the next. And they might sound callous. It really isn't. It's just we take care of so many animals in this field that, you got to make room for what you're currently doing.
Well, and in a sense, it's kind of like you're collectively caring not for one individual animal, but for the species as a whole. So it's like you're like through an SSP, like the entire population in human care is kind of your responsibility in a sense.
Yeah, in a sense. And you also know there's a network of people who are doing the same thing, right? So it's not, you're never like, oh, I hope they're okay. Like sometimes you do hear about an animal that you took care of in the past dying of old age, and then you're hit with that moment of the time you spent in that animal's life. And it can be like, I've been overwhelmed by that feeling before, but never like, as long as I know they're alive, I'm like, oh yeah, that animal, they're out there, they're doing their thing.
Yeah, we have 2 hyacinth macaws that we used to have here before we got our lemurs, and there are days where I miss them, and there are days where I realize that was a lot of work to care for parrots. But where they're at now in Rhode Island, they often include them in their photos and videos that they do, and it's really good to see them just acting the exact same there as they were here, and to know that they are thriving there. It's comforting because I don't have to worry about them. They're doing great.
I love those birds. I mean, this is going a little bit off topic, but I still have a perfectly cut macadamia nut shell from where we used to hand them as part of the programs they would do. They would go out and cut open a macadamia nut with those beaks. Which are
yeah.
intense.
It's like 300 pounds pressure per square inch. It's something insane.
That's pretty crazy. So, I mean, speaking of videos and photos, have you ever actually reached out to another institution when an animal that you used to care for has maybe moved on and asked for updates, or has anybody ever asked you who maybe hasn't used to care for an animal that you now care for?
We did actually recently reach out to SeaWorld because some of our older penguins, they're 30 and 33 years old. We just we felt like we needed to communicate with them and get their input on some of their care and treatment options as they age. And because we knew that some of those caretakers were their original caretakers, it was a courtesy thing. We wanted to ask their opinion, but we also wanted to give them a little bit of an update. So we've kind of been on, the sending end of it recently.
And I'd say a little bit, actually, it happens more the opposite way. When you're recommended to get a new animal and a new animal is coming to you, like you'll message the keepers and be like, can you send us photos? Can you tell us more about them so we know their personality? We can start preparing for having them here and how to take care of them here. And then it's same when we're going to be sending an animal out, like we'll send all that information to their new home so that they don't feel like it's a stranger coming in, and everyone can best take care of that animal. So it's kind of the opposite, really.
I mean, in my brain, there's like a Facebook for zoo and aquarium people who just sort of like post pictures of their kids on their Facebook, so you can kind of keep track of what's going on.
I will say there is a zookeeper Facebook group, and sometimes people post animals, and you'll get a bunch of comments like, "That's so and so. I took care of so and so when they were born," kind of thing. So it happens.
Well, with that, we only had the tail end of our conversation cut off by the technical issue last time around. So we will go ahead and wrap up this discussion of species survival plans, or SSPs, with just my thanks to the 3 of you, to Lori Beth Lee, to Maggie Sipe, and to Bill Hughes for taking the time twice to come to the studio dive cage to chat about this important program and the impact it can have on species populations and human care all over the world, because AZA is an international organization. So thanks to all 3 of you for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Casey.
All right, and if you have any ideas for a future episode of the podcast Aquatic, please send them along to podcast@tnaqua.org. While you're online, make sure that you send us or write us a review or leave us a rating on your podcast platform of choice. Those are all good things that help us without costing you a dime. And until next time, remember that every drop matters.